Hey guys, John here, back for another video. In this video, I want to give you guys an overview of my daily driver bike, my 2010 Ducati Multistrada 1200S. So I bought this bike about a month and a half ago, and I've really enjoyed it so far, but I want to give you guys an overview of what it's actually like to own a Ducati and what it's like to own one of the newer age Ducatis, because a lot of people have misconceptions about the service intervals, how unreliable they are. Just because they're an Italian brand and there's not many parts out there for them. So I'd like to give you guys a little bit of an inside look at what it's like to actually own one of these bikes, and instead of give one of those technical reviews and all that crap that normally YouTubers do. So let's get started. So Ducati's big claim to fame with this bike is it's 4 bikes in one. A sport bike, a touring bike, an enduro bike, and a city bike. And I think it achieves 3 out of 4 of these pretty well. I would say they have the city part down, they have the touring part down, they have the sport bike down even. But I think enduro is one of those areas where this bike would really struggle. The ground clearance isn't that great, even though it does have a meaty skid pad. My dad's R1200 GS over in the corner is way better off-road. Plus, I don't think I would ever want to take this off-road for fear of scraping up these fairings. And with all this carbon fiber and the pretty pieces all over the place, I really don't think this is a bike that you would want to be taking off-road that often. But that being said, it will do fire roads pretty damn well. I did take it off-road down a fire road once, and it handled it pretty well in enduro mode. But honestly, this is definitely a street bike. So you can't talk about the Multistrada 1200S without talking about this engine first. So this engine it's a direct relative to the 1198 sport bike or super bikes, but it has one crucial change. Instead of 23 degrees of valve overlap, it has 11 degrees, which means the torque band is shifted down to the lower RPMs, as well as it's detuned a little bit from 180 horsepower to about 150. That's still more than enough for this kind of bike, and it's enough to melt your face off. The motor also produces about 87.5 foot-pounds of torque, so it's a torque monster, and it does not want to keep the front wheel down in first or second gear. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So we can't talk about this bike without also talking about the suspension. Now this has Ohlins TTX shocks because it's the Multistrada S touring model. It also has Brembo brakes, which come standard on all of the Multistradas. But these Ohlins, actually by the previous owner, were revalved by Catalyst Reaction suspension up here in NorCal, as well as they upgraded the spring rates, so it's a little bit more of a firm ride, a little bit of a sportier ride. But we'll talk about these more when we're riding, but these are incredible, incredible pieces of engineering, the suspension system. So back here you can see where all the fancy shit goes on. We have the single-sided swing arm with the really fancy wheel removal tool right here, which I actually had to order from Ducati. We have a full Termi. I always get the pronunciation wrong, so I just call it the Termi full exhaust. So it has the headers all the way through, decatted, and this thing sounds incredible. You'll hear it start up in a second here. We have the carbon fiber rear wheel hugger. If we come around the back over here, we can see the other Ohlins TTX shock with the remote reservoir up there. That is all electronically controlled by the ESA as well. So let's get up to the dash. So it's a keyless start, so the key is actually in here right now. And all we have to do is turn it on, click once, and the dash lights up. So you have over here your sport, touring, urban, and enduro, and these are all customizable, so you can customize how much traction control, ABS, and power you want for each individual mode, which is fantastic. This system is amazing. So in sport mode, you can see at the top of this shock right here, these cables or this linkage, this is for the ESA, and you can actually feel a huge difference when you change from normal to sport to touring to enduro. It's crazy. So then we have over here, we have your turn signal cancelers. From here, you can also, from the hand grip, you can also look at different metrics such as your range, miles per gallon, etc. It's awesome. So to start the bike from here, all you have to do is really flip the cover. Fires right up. So another thing that we should talk about is seat height. I'm not very tall. I'm only 5'6.5" and this bike is really, really tall for me. The seat height sits at about 33 inches, which is higher than a lot of sport bikes out there. But also the seat is pretty wide, even with this lowered sergeant seat. So I cannot even put both feet down on the ground. If I swing my leg over here without my actual riding boots on, I have to one leg up or one leg on the other side. I can't put both feet on the ground. So this seat height could actually be a problem for a lot of the shorter riders out there, but for someone like myself, I have about 10 years of riding experience under my belt, from dirt bikes to sport bikes to track bikes. So handling this kind of bike isn't that hard, as well as it has a really low center of gravity because that Testastretta V-twin is so low in the chassis, and you don't have anything really in front of you or out here like even the GS, so it feels really light on its feet. And I have no problems maneuvering this even on uneven terrain and off-road, just because of how light it feels, as well as how stable it feels even at low speeds off-road and stuff like that. So honestly, it's not a big deal, the seat height. It's something that you do get used to as a shorter rider, but it's something that you definitely have to consider if you're definitely a newer rider or someone that's not comfortable riding something this small.
Alright guys, welcome to the fun part of the review, where I actually get to tell you guys what this bike is like to ride around town and in the canyons, because I'm going to do some canyon riding on the way home. It is a beautiful, beautiful Friday evening out here in Northern California, and I have some great roads up by me on the way home, so you guys will get a look at both aspects of this bike. So most of you guys will be riding this bike in the city, but there'll be some people that want to ride this bike in the canyons like myself. So let's go. So I'm going to be going over some of the main aspects of this bike, such as the engine, the transmission, the fueling, the suspension, the chassis, and the brakes. So in order, I'm going to go start with the engine. So around town, people would probably think that a big twin making this much power and torque would be very unruly, but it's very refined. The torque comes on very, very strong, but it's not unmanageable. You can basically pass anyone that you want in 5th gear or 6th gear even sometimes. It's pretty crazy. For around town riding, this is the bike that you want, because the motor is so punchy you don't have to wind it out. There's so much mid-range grunt that you really don't need to do anything besides twist the throttle a little bit, and the bike will just fucking fly by anyone. Like this. This amount of power and torque makes filtering through traffic super easy, and the bike will not keep the front wheel down at all in 1st gear. It will actually pull power wheelies really easily in 1st gear. So you always have to be a little bit cautious, because the bike doesn't have a steering damper or wheelie control, but it's a lot of fun, very controllable. It's awesome. So for around town, the power and the torque is amazing. I always keep it on the highest setting, the 150 horsepower setting, because I don't really like riding with anything less, honestly. So next, let's talk about the ergonomics. So the ergonomics for city riding are super comfortable. The upright bars, the seating position, everything, the foot pegs, everything gives you so much room, so much. It's just such a nice place to spend a lot of time, honestly. I've been commuting on this bike now for a few weeks. I commute about 25 miles back and forth to work, and to be completely honest, I enjoy this more than my M3 on the commute. Just like that, it won't keep the front wheel down. But the ergonomics are all super easy. Map switching on the fly via your turn signal control over here. You have all of your controls really easily accessible. The horn button's literally right there. Everything you'd ever want in a touring bike is right here. But this being a 2010 model, it doesn't have things like cruise control or heated grips or any of like the creature comforts that we come to know and love. But I don't really need it. Honestly, this is fine because I don't do any major touring. I just commute and back road. Let's talk about, coming up to this red light, let's talk about braking performance. So the bike has ABS standard. It also has traction control, which both are adjustable. Both work super well. Never lock up with the front wheel. I've never actually engaged the ABS, even though I've done some pretty hard stops. One thing I've noticed though is the rear brake doesn't really bite that hard. Like, that's all rear brake. It doesn't really bite too hard. It stops you, but it doesn't bite. Oh my god. Braking performance is stellar. This bike is also on Michelin Pilot Road 5 tires, so the stopping performance and the cornering performance, everything is amazing. What else can I say about it? So let's now talk about the suspension. Now I've gone over the brakes. The suspension are upgraded Ohlins TTX units. They've been custom revalved by Catalyst Reaction Suspension up here in California. They have a stiffer spring rate from the factory which honestly I thought was going to be a huge deal for me being a commuter bike, but I really don't care. The bike is super compliant. It turns in super fast. It soaks up all of the bumps. It doesn't bump me around or throw me around or jar me around. It's really good. And I can't speak for the stock Multistrada suspension, but from what I've heard, it's a little bit underdamped, especially for a rider 150, 160, 170 pounds like I am. But to be completely honest, the suspension is fucking phenomenal. Like, if you can put up with a slightly harsher ride, it's worth it in the cornering performance and the braking performance, because you don't get all that brake dive under braking, and it just rides like it's on rails, like you'll see in the backroading video I have coming up. So people always ask me, why am I commuting with a Ducati? Because they're so unreliable, they're so hard to take care of and maintain. To be completely honest, in the last couple thousand miles I put on this bike, the maintenance has been very little. It did need tires, and it is coming up on the 15,000 mile service, but since Ducati has increased the service interval to 15,000 miles, it's not nearly as hard to maintain these bikes as it was in the past. I also want to address the seat height. The seat height is a very tall 33 inches. Me being 5'6", it is sometimes hard for me to stop on certain terrain or stop at uneven ground, or put the kickstand up on uneven ground. But to be completely honest, stopped here at a stoplight, I'm perfectly happy one-legging it. The bike feels super light, super agile. And that's also something about this bike. It feels so light and agile on its feet. In town, it just feels so easy to flick and throw around that it doesn't feel like a big touring bike like say the R1200 GS does. Little power wheelie there. So let's talk about freeway performance since we're coming up on the freeway over here. So let's talk about freeway performance since we're on the freeway. For freeway riding, this bike actually does a really good job with it. California freeways are notoriously bad because they have cracks, they have bumps, they're just not the best maintained. They're not as bad as some of the other winter states, but they're not great by any means. And this bike soaks up all the bumps, super comfortable. The ergonomics are fantastic. The windshield is adjustable, as you guys just saw me fiddle around with two hands to adjust it up. The wind buffeting isn't bad. This display is super easy to read, even when the sun is behind you, which is a great plus. The handlebars are just in the right position, the foot pegs are in the right position to be super comfortable when you're riding on the freeway. That's all I have to say about the freeway riding. I'll see you guys in the canyons. Alright guys, we're getting off the freeway here in a second. I just wanted to show you guys how I switched to sport mode. So you go over here to the hand signal, you click once, it brings up the menu, you scroll through by clicking again, you hold it down once you get to the option you want, it's going to say close throttle to activate, and then you're all good to go. Alright, so let's talk about how this bike handles corners, because that is what you guys are all wanting to know, right? And the answer to that is... oh, so good. So good. So I wanted to touch on the transmission for a second. It's not the best transmission ever. It's a little bit vague and clunky. And you have to be really positive with your shifts or you'll find yourself getting false neutrals in fourth, going to fifth. Oh, it's a little bit cold up here today. So I'm going to warm the tires a little bit. Not going to go too fast right now. But up here is where this bike loves to live. It's so happy in the twisties. The suspension absorbs all these bumps on this really, really bumpy road, nice and easy. The bike loves to lean, so you can get a bunch of lean angle on it. So, this engine, how is it in back roads? Let me just say, it's so fast. You'll find yourself coming up the next corner way faster than you anticipate. This bike actually likes if you ride it like a sport bike and less like a touring bike. So it likes you to lean off the bike a little bit. It likes you to do basically everything that you would do on a sport bike, except you're a little bit more upright. Let's talk about braking performance. Brakes are some of the strongest I've seen on a bike in this class in a really long time. Those Brembos do such a good job scrubbing speed at corner entry. It's just, this bike is so easy to ride fast because it transitions super nicely. It's not overwhelming on the power or the torque. Very linear and progressive. It's just so easy to ride this bike really fast on the street. It loves tight stuff. I actually think this is better on tight stuff than my Gixxer, to be completely honest. The suspension, the brakes, everything as the package is just so solid and so good. It's just such a well put together package for backroading. The front end just dives in. It really turns nice and sharp. There's so much feedback through the front axle that it's so easy to read what this bike likes and what this bike doesn't like. There's just so much power and torque everywhere that I can stay in third gear in this really tight section, and there's more than enough power to play with. You're never feeling like you want more power. Everything just feels so well sorted. The chassis feels balanced, neutral. The ergonomics are so good for backroading. It just feels like it's almost meant to be pushed like this. And Ducati says that this bike is 4 bikes in one. I think they nailed the sport bike aspect of this. This really feels like an upright sports bike. And the thing is, you would think it feels really, really heavy and really, really big, but it's quite the opposite. It actually feels quite small and quite nimble and agile. It changes directions and transitions so well that it feels like the bike weighs 400 pounds when it really weighs, what, 518 or something like that, wet? It feels small because it's so narrow and compact. I have a Sergeant seat on this. I forgot to mention, the Sergeant seat is such a good seat. It's just so easy to lean my leg, get my leg off, keep the bike upright, and actually ride this bike like a sport bike. I actually honestly enjoy this more than my GSXR, because that bike you have to rev the shit out of to get any performance. With this, you really don't. You have torque from like 4,000 RPM. It's insane. Oh my god, I'm having so much fun. That's what this bike really is, though. It's fun. It's so fun. It's so easy to ride fast, and it's just so fun. Like, I know I have a lot of riding experience, and I do track my bike quite often, so I have a lot of experience with race bikes and stuff. But quite honestly, for the street, this makes such a good argument. I know this more turned into a rave than anything. The bike just acts so at home on back roads that there's nothing negative to say about it. It's just So planted, so controllable, so amazing. I urge every single one of my subscribers, well, at the time of this video, probably not that many subscribers, I urge every one of my viewers to go ride one of these bikes if you have the chance, because they will not disappoint you. If you guys know where I am, thumbs up, like, and if you're around the Bay Area, around Berkeley, come ride with me. Alright, so that's all I have to say about the Multistrada 1200S on the back roads. I'll finish back up in my apartment and give you my final thoughts. I'll see you guys there.
Hey guys, so we're back in my apartment here. I just wanted to wrap things up and tell you a little bit about my final thoughts about the bike. So I've owned the bike for about 2 months now. I put about 1,300 miles on it, and that consists of a mix of freeway riding, city riding, and canyon riding, so I have a good understanding about the chassis balance and what it's like to actually ride this bike. The only place I haven't ridden this bike is at the track, which I actually might do a track day with it just to see, maybe just one session to see how it performs on track and the how those Ohlins work on track. But my conclusions is this bike is phenomenal, right? So the chassis balance is on point. It feels very light, very agile, very easy to control through the twisties and through city riding. The engine is fantastic. It is phenomenal. It is the best street bike engine that I think I've ever ridden. That twin just has so much torque and so much power, and it's so linear and so punchy, and it's just an amazing all-around motor. The suspension soaks up all the bumps. It's a little bit firm sometimes because of the upgraded spring rate, but that pays off in the canyon riding. It definitely carves up the twisties. Now, the one area that I think this bike could probably not be so good is off-road, because the R1200 GS is the class leader because of that. It's a good enduro bike and off-road bike. But Ducati did a really good job making a bike an all-around just amazing bike. It's a sport bike, it's a touring bike, it's a city bike, and you can use it to commute. And it can hold luggage and a passenger, and it's just one of the best bikes I've ever ridden in my life, and I am so happy with my purchase. One thing I will say is the maintenance is quite expensive. I'm coming up on 15,000 miles here in about another 500 miles. So I got a quote from Ducati, a Ducati dealer here in Northern California, and they want about $1,200 to do the valve adjustment and all that stuff. But this is much better than the old Ducatis that was every 5,000 miles you have to do valve adjustments. So they've gotten much better on the maintenance schedules in the new age bikes, but still it's something to consider if you are going to buy one of the Ducatis, because they are very expensive to maintain. Now, future plans for the bike, I'm planning on getting some maybe aftermarket levers and aftermarket foot controls, so the rear brake and the clutch, or not the clutch, and the gear shift, because when I am wearing my riding boots, they are a little bit vague. And the clutch lever and the brake lever, I would like them to be adjustable, so those are two upgrades that I'm thinking about doing here soon. But other than that, the bike is perfect the way it is, and I am so glad that I bought it, and I hope you guys have really enjoyed this in-depth look at the Ducati Multistrada 1200S. If you guys have any questions about the bike, or if you want to know some more things about it that I didn't cover in this video, just leave a comment down below, or shoot me an email, find me on social media, etc. But anyway, I will see you guys in the next video.